Okay, so today is another day for our meetup, and we are together with two ladies tonight, with Reggie and with Malaysia. Reggie is from India, Malaysia is from US, and it's just after the International Women's Day, and we are really happy to host you after International Women's Day. It's a coincidence, I guess, but yeah, it looks like right just after 8 March to have you both of you. Thank you for joining our meetup. And before beginning, I would like to really thank to our sponsors, especially don't you for our audience. I mean, there will be a workshop by JFrog by the end of the month. You can join and don't miss the new Kubernetes ingress controller of Tyke, which is our other sponsor. Tyke is an API gateway startup, and now already they have been growing from UK, from London. You can see those guys in Shoreditch if you want to visit them. JFrog usually visits also London, so they're also one of our sponsors. And so thanks again to our sponsors. And so we'll begin with Malaysia tonight. And for Reggie, she will join also in after the Malaysia's presentation. So Malaysia, welcome all the way from US, right? So thank you for joining tonight. And Malaysia, from what you can see also, she likes a lot Japanese culture, right? You can also mention a bit Malaysia. Have you been to Japan or?
Japan.
Oh, you have been, okay. So I will leave the audience with you, Malaysia, and you for the audience, you can just for you to know that you can write your comments in the chat window, and we will be answering the questions just in case for you to know. And that's all for now. I'll be in the background also. Malaysia, it's on you now.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. So, questions after the talk is over, just so y'all know. But my name is Melisha McGregor, and I'm a developer advocate at Conducto, and that's just where we make these really cool pipelines that you can run your web applications and data science models through. But tonight I want to talk to you about securing your web application pipelines from intruders. So in my talks, I always like to give an overview, especially since we've been virtual. That way you know where you can kind of tune in and tune out and maybe fast forward through later. But to get started, we'll go through some of the most common best practices in CI/CD. Then we'll go over why security gets overlooked so often in CI/CD. And we'll talk about how intruders work and some of the tools that they use. We'll get into some of the things that you can do in your organization to help prevent these intruders from getting access to your applications or pipelines or private secrets, all that good stuff. And then we'll go just through these three different CI/CD tools and show you how you can implement the other parts that we'll be talking about. So you'll have security checks in your pipelines that run automatically. And lastly, we'll just finish up with some key takeaways and a few little words I hope will help you as you go back to work. But the first thing we'll start with are the common best practices. So keep your build size small. And the reason for this is because you want to make sure that your builds are running fast. So the reason we like our builds to be small and run fast is so we can make multiple deploys throughout the day without hogging up a lot of resources, or one deploy takes up, 2 hours to get out to production. And also make sure that your CI/CD pipeline is the only way to deploy changes to prod. Because in some legacy systems, in some current systems, there are ways you can deploy to prod locally. You can deploy from other machines. Maybe you have some weird script you wrote when you first made the deploy process. But at this point, when you're really trying to clean up your pipeline to make sure things are secure, make sure that prod is the only way, that your pipeline is the only way to deploy to prod. That way you have full control over what happens. You can see when, who, what changes were made in just a really convenient place. And then try to keep parity with prod across different environments. You'll probably have some kind of staging environment that developers push to. You might have QA environments that the QA team checks for different user issues. But these tests are only as good as their comparison to prod. You want to make sure that all of your environments are as similar to production as possible, or else your testing efforts, they just aren't going to tell you exactly what users are going to run into or the things that intruders might have access to. So keep things in parity with prod. And then I know this is one that a lot of developers love, hate, but make sure that if your project has any tests, run them locally first. That way you save yourself some runtime in your pipelines, which also helps speed up that deploy process. Because when you have multiple agents or multiple nodes that are queued up, you don't want to just be pushing changes without running those tests first and taking up extra space. So just do it before you commit your changes and things will go a lot smoother. And the last thing that definitely is understated is to write documentation for other engineers. At some point, you might be that other engineer because it's 6 months later and you haven't touched this project. So make sure that any tricky things with your pipelines are well documented. Make sure that environment variables are at least described somewhere internally so people know where to look if they need to make updates or add new environmental variables. Just make sure that you have your pipeline as documented as you need for a new engineer to come on and figure out what they need to do. So let's talk about some of the reasons CI/CD security gets overlooked in the first place. A lot of times it really comes down to just really tight deadlines. So you have time restrictions on how much you can work on your pipelines. Most of the time, you just want to get something up and running so you can deploy to whatever your different environments are. And that is one of the reasons security gets overlooked because a lot of people sometimes push security to the bottom until it's a problem. Also, it can be hard to find answers when it comes to security implementation in CI/CD. You might not be sure which tools to use or what part of your deploy process you should be running tests in. And there are so many different answers for this. So finding answers that apply to your pipeline specifically, that's one of the reasons things can be overlooked, like security. And I'm not sure about y'all, but YAML is not a language that most people use every day. So when you have to add something else to these YAML files that you aren't quite sure of what they mean, how the syntax works, you just do what you have to do to get your pipeline deploying things correctly. And maybe later you come back and think about security. But most of the time, we just leave it out. And also, many times once a pipeline is set up, nobody touches it for months unless something breaks or there's a new process that needs to be added. These files aren't updated frequently. And of course, we have those to-dos where we say we're going to come back and add security, but that might be 6 months, 7 months from now, and it just keeps getting pushed down. Another reason is that there are some organizations that have dedicated DevOps people, but in a lot of them, engineers, the ones that are writing the front end or back end code, are responsible for creating these pipelines. And when that happens, well, they don't quite know what all should go into a pipeline, and security just doesn't make it. So these are some of the reasons that security gets overlooked in the first place. And when we do overlook security, we leave our apps open to intruders. So they just use different free and paid tools. If you want to see an entire suite of attacker tools, you should try out the Kali Linux OS. It has, I think, close to 100 just attacker tools you can use to get information off of networks, to read data that's being sent. It just has everything you could possibly need to try and get information from an application. And they also check for things like misconfigurations in your app. Like maybe you have your user permissions too open and they try a different URL, or they try to make a request against your API with some weirdness hidden in a header. They're just poking around to see if there's any weaknesses. And this is one that catches a lot of people. They look for secrets in your version control. So if you have a public GitHub repo, make sure that you aren't committing any secrets, passwords, usernames, anything that an attacker could use to possibly get access to your system. And another thing they check for are just open ports. Maybe you spun up a port to test some API on and it just got forgotten. But that port is still open, and if somebody pings around your network long enough, they just might find it. And they'll have this open door into pretty much everything that they want access to. So make sure you don't have any open ports. And this is one that also catches a lot of people off guard, is that they just look for vulnerabilities in your packages. If you have something like a package.json or a pip file somewhere and it lists the version numbers for the packages you're using, if you aren't up to date with the most recent version, they can just go into that package, look at the change log, look at any security patches, and if you're not using the version that has those patches, they can take advantage of it because it's well documented and it's very clearly explained how the vulnerability works. So just some incentive to keep your packages up to date. Now we can talk about some of the tools you can use in different phases of your pipeline to make sure that everything in your application is as secure as it can be. So the first tool we'll talk about is the OWASP dependency check. This is just an open source tool that it checks for any publicly disclosed vulnerabilities within your project's dependencies. And you just add this on to your pipeline in the build phase. And Sonatype Nexus, this is another one that's super similar to OWASP dependency check. It's a free scanner that checks for any open source vulnerabilities. I believe this one has it where you can do a quick check just by putting in a site URL. So that's another way an attacker could find out what vulnerabilities your application has. But moving on to the test phase. So this is usually when you're running things like if you're a JavaScript developer, npm test would be run here. But you can also run with the OWASP Zap tool. And this is one that just tests the messages that are sent between your browser and the web app. So it can be used on any operating system you want. And then Veracode, this project pretty much has tools for any security testing you could want, but it's particularly useful when you want to check for dependency vulnerabilities or maybe do some pen testing. And then there's Sneak. So we'll use Sneak as an example in our demo pipelines, but it's just a really good general tool for checking for vulnerabilities like the OWASP top 10s, DOS attacks, cross-site scripting, code injection, stuff like that. And then in the delivery phase, when you've gotten to the point you have your build, it's tested, and you're ready to ship it to maybe staging, there's SQL map, and this will check to make sure that there's no way for SQL injection attacks to happen. There's also Chef Inspec, and it checks to make sure if your application has to meet any like federal requirements or specific industry requirements or regulations, it checks to make sure your code is compliant and it meets all of those standards. And then there's another tool called BERT. So this just checks for request and response interceptions. There's a free version and a paid version. I think the free version does most of what you'll need. So it's a way just to check for your request and response interceptions. And then the last part that you can check is in prod itself. In the deploy phase, you can go to a service like HackerOne, BugCrowd, or ThreatStack and put out bug bounties for people, and they will just try to attack your application, and they'll report on any weaknesses they find, and that's when you award them the bounty. But there are a few things you can do. So make sure you keep your user permissions up to date so that nobody has admin access when they shouldn't. Make sure that you pay attention to those security patches from any third-party services or libraries you use. And make sure that there aren't any unnecessary ports open. That one can really go unnoticed until somebody is actually in your system. And then look at any security features that your CI/CD tool uses. That's just something already built in, so you might as well take advantage of it. And use something like an IaaS tool. Like this way, if there are some kind of security flaws detected in your pipeline, it pushes issues to some kind of tracking system, maybe Trello or Jira or whatever other tool you use. And of course, make sure everything is encrypted. So responses and requests should always be encrypted just in case there is some kind of interception. Check the OWASP top 10 list. I think last time I looked at that site, it said like over 70% of all websites online have some kind of security flaw related to these top 10. So make sure yours isn't one of them. And use the same tools attackers are going to use, because that'll give you better insight on how to protect your application and your data and your users. And now we'll just get into some really, really fast code examples. So I wanted to show you what testing in different pipelines actually looks like. This is just a regular Circle CI config, but we have Sneak in here, and we've brought in the orb, but down here is where it gets interesting. So after we have installed all of our dependencies, we go ahead and do this Sneak scan. This is going to check for any dependencies that have vulnerabilities that are known about. And if the issue is severe enough, it will let us know, but it won't stop the pipeline from running. It will report to us that it's an issue though. But this is just to show you how simple it is to add a test into a Circle pipeline. It's just this little chunk of code here. And we can also do that in a tool called Conducto. And it's a little bit different from the others that you might be used to because it's written in Python, but it's essentially the same concept. So you have this pipeline, it's run on a Docker container, and in the container, this is where you get to do your tests. So again, after you install any of your packages, you go ahead and just run a simple command called sneak test. And sneak is a part of your package JSON, so you have access to it after everything is installed. And the last example will be with Travis CI. So this is a simple Travis pipeline, and it's fairly easy to add a sneak test as well. You add it to your dependency list. We've gone ahead and run npm install, and now we run sneak test. And sneak test just generates this report that tells us about any of the packages we have that might have potential vulnerabilities. So now that you've seen a few example pipelines, we can go ahead and wrap up with some key takeaways. First thing, keep all of your secrets safe. Do not commit secrets to version control. You might be able to get rid of them, but it's going to be really, really hard. So just make sure that you don't do a git commit with any secrets or passwords. And whenever you're doing major feature changes, or maybe you're going through a refactoring time, do a quick audit of your CI/CD config. That way it stays up to date, more people know how it works, and if there is anything that can be improved, like adding security tests, you can go ahead and do that. Check that you aren't using any third-party services that have known vulnerabilities and they haven't patched them. So your application can be as secure as you can possibly make it, but if you have a third-party service that isn't, that's another way for attackers to access your data or interfere with your app running. And the last thing is, don't be afraid to try new tools. You never know. A lot of these new tools make it really easy to make new pipelines, to build out new features, and to try testing new things. So even if it's just on a small portion of a project, try out a new tool just to see if it helps. If it doesn't, you can just delete it. And if it does, you will be some kind of hero that saved the day. But that's all I have for you all today. Again, my name is Melisha McGregor, and I'm a developer advocate at Conducto. But you can follow me online on Twitter at Flipped Coding. So I hope this was useful to you all.
Thank you, Malisha. It was a great one, and I'm also adding Reggie to the session. And before leaving Malaysia, can you? Is there anything else you want to add to our audience, or any type of your feedback around your experience on CI/CD security?
The main thing is to include it as early in the process as you can. Like, don't leave it as an afterthought because it can be a little tricky to implement later on.
Okay, you're right. We can consider it as maybe a technical debt, right? If you keep them for a future. So thank you again, Malaysia, and hopefully to see you maybe in the future also as a speaker in our meetup. So thank you again. Have a good day.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye. And now we are with Reggie. Welcome, Reggie. And Reggie will be here today with us with topic feature of observability. And for you to know, Reggie has a very special talent. She's optimized to run on the low fuel. I don't know what does it mean, but maybe Reggie, you can tell us. I think you're not a foodie, maybe, right? You don't eat that much, but you work efficient, I guess.
Yeah, hello, good evening. So
Hi.
generally, my friends used to comment that I'm not a foodie, so I don't. I take very little when it comes to meals, but I'm energetic the entire day. Now, if you see it, India, the time is almost 12 night. So but still, whatever be the time, I'll be able to do it. Or so that's why people call me, you run less fuel, extra mileage is what is Raji for us. So that's how my friends used to call me. So possibly that's what Avinash told also. Anyway,
Yeah, seems
thank
right.
you.
You seem energetic even at midnight. So yeah, I think that should be true. Yeah. So I'm leaving you with the audience, Raji, and thank you again for joining.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. So happy to virtually meet you all through this platform. So it would have been good we were able to do it on a physical meetup, but given the current situation, we must feel happy that we are able to at least do this and can stay connected with people. That's very important. So, the topic that I will be talking today is about the future of observability in an experience driven economy. So, before I get there, if you have seen the Meetup page, the introduction about me or what I do is always there. So, I'm known as Raji, and I'm a director of product management at Site 24/7, which is a monitoring tool, but that's not the tool that I'm going to talk here. I'll be giving some general um, tips or general analysis on the particular topic at hand. So I have 21 years of experience in this industry. So with that note, we'll get started. So I'm sharing a different screen. So I'll be there on that screen. I may not be able to see the comments or questions that are posted here. Please keep your questions coming. I'll answer them towards the end of the presentation. I have my presentation for 25 to 30 minutes. Then I can take some questions. And if there are any, if you're not able to hear me or see me clearly, I would expect the Rayan to just interrupt because I'll not be able to see any comments here. Okay. So the agenda goes like this. The topics that I'll be covering today are mostly about the importance of digital experience. Why is digital experience important? And then about observability and monitoring. What do I have to say about them? And about DevOps. This is a DevOps meetup, and most of the people are DevOps and SRE is another stream. So how is observability to connect with DevOps and SRE? And then about the pillars of observability, how you can achieve them, and what I see as the future, generally based on the experience that we have worked on. I'll just quickly spend some 3-4 minutes on each of the topics. So let's get first started with the experience. So digital experience. When I hear the terminology or when I read about the digital experience, I was what do you say? This book came to my mind. So this is a book by author Kathy Sierra, the book by name Badass Making Users Awesome. I just have this here in my table. This is one of my favorite books. So if you see, if any of you have not read this book, I would recommend you to read this book to have a different perspective towards how to approach a problem and how you can approach or take your business to the next level. So that is something important for all of us. So Kathy Sierra, she's a programmer or converted author, and she has many tidbits in this book. Of the many tidbits, I have few things that I feel is relevant and that I wanted to share. There is this question in one of the books, or one of the pages of this book, called "Which would you rather have a user feel?" And the author has 4 options for this. This might look like a tricky question, but let's look at what the author has to say about the options that are available. So the question is about, what do you want your user to feel? All of us have business, or all of us are developers, or all of us are working DevOps. Whatever role you play, you're working for some organization, or you're owning the enterprise business yourself. There are customers, users to whom we work for. So what do you want your user to feel? Do you want them to feel this product is awesome? Assume the product belongs to you. you are the owner of the product, or you are the one who's building the product. Do you want them to have the feeling that the product is awesome, or this company is awesome, this company that is building the product is awesome? Do you want your user to have that feeling, or this brand is awesome, this brand that belongs to this company that is building this product is awesome? Well, this might look like a tricky question, but if you have to choose only one answer out of the four that is given here, she goes on to say, not these three. There is the fourth option, which she says you must have your user feel, and that goes as, I am awesome. Make your users feel they are awesome. Make them have that feel because of using this product that the company has developed or that belongs to this brand. Make them feel that they are awesome. But if you think, people don't actually talk like that. Nobody says, I am awesome because I'm using this product. They only say, I love this app. This app is very amazing. I love this watch, or I love this product. That's how they talk. So she goes on to say, when the user says, this product is amazing, you should see what it does, they mean, I am amazing. You should see what I can do with it. So when you have your user have such a feeling, you will get the user who's the centerpiece. When the user feels that I am awesome, these are all the many things that they will do. They will remain loyal, and they'll be able to tolerate problems even if there are some issues in the product. Because they have that feeling, they will be able to tolerate it. They will resist competition. They will not want to go with another product, and they will start talking about it. So they will start evangelizing, and there will be some groups that they form and discuss about it. Lot of things that they do. So what is important, the centerpiece is the successful user. So for your business to be successful in the longer run, the secret for sustained success, that's what I call it as, is having successful users. And if you want to have successful users, the user experience is important. The experience could be in any form, in the way that you respond to the customer, or in the way you write an email for them. In the UI, possibly you can give them extra options or do the customizations and configurations without their involvement, take care of all the automations. Could be in any form, but the extra touch that you give to make them feel that they are happy and to make them feel that they are awesome is what will make you succeed in your business. So that is what is important, that we refer as experience. User experience is important, and there are many articles to substantiate this. There is this one Forbes article which talks about the 100 different facts about digital world and user experience. We are all in this digital transformation journey where different industries are in different stages, and there are 100 different facts that you can say about digital transformation and user experience. I've just chosen 5 to substantiate the facts that we are talking here. 89% of companies have adopted digital first strategy. They would want to take their business in the digital front first. They don't want to do any on-premise. That's what companies are moving. 86% of companies believe cloud technology is critical for digital transformation. See, you want to move to the cloud and use, you have to use the latest technologies. There is no point in saying that I will be using my own legacy technologies, but still I want to move to the cloud. So companies have believed that they have to use the latest technologies, which is critical for their digital transformation. 67% of consumers will pay more for a great experience. We saw, right? The experience is important. If you have that corrected, customers will be willing to pay more for that. 87% of companies think digital will disrupt their industry. So they have started moving towards digital, all the on-premise versions that they had. And it is not just the startups and SMBs. The enterprises have started to believe that they have to move to the cloud, and 83% of enterprise workload are already in the cloud. So all of this substantiate that experience is important, user experience, digital experience is important, and we are living in this era of experience-driven economy. So the experience that you're going to give for your customers in any form is going to have a great impact on how your business itself is going to be taken in the long run. So that is important. Now that we have talked about the experience part, let's move to observability. So what all I have to discuss here about observability. So I have some 3-4 topics. First thing is, people, a lot of time there is the confusion, or I shouldn't call it confusion. So there isn't a clear difference between what is observability. I'm often hearing these terms now because we have been used to knowing about monitoring. So is there a difference? Are they both the same, or is it similar? So those questions arise. So I have a different representation for how I see observability versus monitoring. So I call observability as the base. Your systems, whatever you want to monitor, be it your application or your servers or your infrastructure components or your database component, whatever you want to monitor, the entire system, they must be first observable. By observable, we mean only if the system is only if the system has, or if the server has SNMP protocol in it, you will be able to fetch the data using that protocol. Only if your application has APIs using which you can collect the data, you will be able to collect the data. So make sure your system is observable. So observability forms the base on top of which monitoring resides. When the system is observable, you can do monitoring, you can collect various metrics and use any tool, do monitoring and collect metrics. But it is not sufficient to just collect the metrics and have them as silos. The important thing that you have to do after collecting the metrics is analysis. You must be able to correlate the data, analyze the data that is collected, and make meaningful insight out of it. There are a lot of tools that gives out of the box analysis, or if you are using some open source tools for your monitoring capabilities, you must be able to do the analysis on top of it. So this is the stack that I see as for observability versus monitoring. Moving on to the next section. What is DevOps? What is SRE? And what observability has to do with it? DevOps, we have different definitions. But I see DevOps or I represent DevOps in a different way. So how do I represent this is one way of doing the representation. So there is this stream called developers who actually writes the code, compiles them, bundles it into a product, and they think with that their job is done, and they pass it on to the other person who's the operator. So the operator actually takes care of deploying the build, attending to end user complaints, making sure the SLA is met, keeping track of the application's availability performance, and do some analysis on top of it. So all these are the job of operator. So these two roles, it was more like a blame game, some cases where it's not my problem, it's not, the ball is not in my court, it used to happen. But with digital picking up and with businesses moving to the cloud, we need quicker turnaround. We need to respond quickly to customers. These two roles merged and became what is called DevOps, where I see it as one person who should have some amount of knowledge of what is happening in the development to what is happening in deployment. But as shown in this diagram, he or she is not a superhuman to do things by themselves. They have to make use of monitoring tools. With cloud picking up, security is important, and we saw the previous speaker, Melissa, talk about in detail about what are all the security aspects that you need to take care in your pipeline, CI/CD pipeline. So this entire pipeline security is important, and that is how DevSecOps is picking up, where security has to be applied in all the layers from development to deployment. So this is a representation for DevOps and DevSecOps. Now, what is SRE? So this is something that is another terminology that we often hear. I see DevOps and SRE as two sides of the same coin. So if DevOps is about what to do, the processes, SRE is more about how to do things. So this is not something new that I'm saying. You can, when we go read about it, we'll be able to collect all these points. So DevOps mainly focuses on the principles and processes, and their primary focus is the speed and delivery of the entire CI/CD pipeline system, while SRE is more operation oriented and they have to respond to incidences. Their focus is more towards the production deployment setup, where they take care of looking at alerts and the fault reductions and automations. The primary focus becomes reliability. So if you have to say it in Java terminologies, Java developers, if you are there, you'll be able to understand. Class SRE implements DevOps. That's how it is. And for these, whatever role you play, you are a DevOps or an SRE, you have to have a complete knowledge of the end-to-end visibility of what is happening across all the layers of any cloud architecture. So the cloud architecture can be segregated as 4 different layers. The topmost is end user, next is your application, then platform, then infrastructure. So for a DevOps or SRE to know what is happening in all these layers, they have to make use of monitoring tools. But let's first look at what are these layers. So the end user layer is primarily the one where your end client cloud clients reside, where the end customers connect using your browsers or mobile applications or your tablets. It could be anything. So that forms the end user layer. And then the next layer is your application layer, which is nothing but your software as a service layer, where actually the business logic is hosted. Next is your platform, which comprises of your caching servers, NoSQL databases, or queues or microservices. All of this forms the platform layer. And if you see for application or platform or for infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, application as a service, all of this are available. There are vendors who are available who provide these services. And what is needed from a business person is just think of your business logic, make use of all these layers that are available and take your business quickly. So infrastructure layer comprises of the servers, be it your physical server, virtual server, cloud server, the load balancer, firewall, network, all this comprises the infrastructure layer. So keep in mind, the DevOps or the SRE person should know what is happening across all these layers. Only then they will be able to attend to some problems, because the problem could be anywhere in this layer. There could be a problem in your router switch port is not working, or there could be a problem in your end user in the browser, in a particular version of a browser, the JavaScript is not working. Whatever be the problem in whichever layer it is, it's going to have an impact in your application. So that being the case, only if you are able to know what is happening in all these layers, you can fix the problem. You can make sure the problem doesn't happen again with the help of monitoring tools. So let's look at what are the pillars of observability. So based on all these 4 layers can be categorized into major 3 pillars. I'm sure all of us are aware of these 3 pillars. I'll just get quickly into details of each of these one. The first one is metrics. Whatever, for all these layers, there are different metrics that you can collect. Depending on what you want to monitor, the metrics will vary. The metric could be, if you are monitoring your application, the metric will be response time. How quickly am I able to get the response? Or how many people are accessing my application? Throughput. So those will be the metrics. If you are monitoring your infrastructure, the server component, what is the CPU usage? What is the memory usage? What is the disk utilization? So those will be the metrics. Depending on what you want to monitor, the metrics will vary, and metrics are important. The second one is trace. By trace, you need to know the exact line of code that is having an issue. Across all these layers, there could be problem anywhere. Possibly you haven't closed a result set in your database call. If that is the problem, when there is an issue, the trace should be able to give you those details. So tracing is important. And then logs. With distributed architecture and things moving to the cloud, and we having a lot of distributed servers, it is not possible for the DevOps or the IT person to log into each of the servers across the globe to see what the problem is. Because when a problem occurs, the first thing we do is go look at the logs. It could be access logs, it could be application log, could be anything, but logs are important. So these 3 are the pillars. Let's look at in detail as to how we can achieve this observability. So achieving observability, the first topic is about metrics. So what are the different metrics that you have to collect? So I'll quickly talk about 5 important metrics any tool that you use that has to collect. The first is about the availability metrics. The availability is more as to uptime metrics. The uptime has to be collected from all the layers. Is my front-end application working fine? What is the uptime there? Is my infrastructure component working fine? What is the uptime there? So in cloud, people are expecting 99.999% availability. It's almost 100%, but a slight variation. That's how the competition is. If you want to be ahead of the competition, you have to monitor this and make sure your systems are all available, up and running, and they don't go down. Availability metrics is important. Next, security metrics are important. How are you able to monitor are you monitoring your SSL certificate? If your domain is going to expire, the tool that you are using, is it able to give you notification in advance? Are there any website defacements in your browse, in your application that you are using? So you must be monitoring all the security aspects as well. Lot of security tools are there to monitor your front end or your back end or your database. In all layers, security has to be monitored. Performance is important. There is no point in having all your resources up and running if they are going to perform very, very slow, because none of us have the time or patience to sit and watch pages that are going to take forever to load. What do? We just move on to the next page. Then how do you make sure your application comes in the first page of any search engine? For all of those, performance is important. Performance metrics are important. If your application is going to take some 10 seconds, you must be able to know the split up of where the time is spent more, and you must be able to optimize it. For performance monitoring and performance metrics, again, tools can help you. Scalability metrics. Possibly when you start, you are starting your business as a startup, but you may have to scale. When you're in deployment and when you're going to get a high value deal from an enterprise, you cannot say no. That's an opportunity. Is your system capable of handling that load, both horizontally and vertically? So you must monitor those metrics. So see if you can add additional instances based on load. Is your system capable of doing it? Or if you want to increase your RAM size or CPU size, can you do that? So you must be monitoring the scalability metrics as well. Then cost. Cost is something when you move to the cloud, people forget and burn their fingers, because whatever cloud you use, whatever public cloud you use, the first time you start using, you give your card information. With that, you forget about it, because payment is being done by another department, another finance department. That's not my problem. Lot of time we are paying for unused resources because we would have forgotten to bring it down. Possibly the size of that instance is not required. So those are some things that you need to monitor. So based on cost, are you utilizing the resources fully, or are you underutilizing them? Are you overutilizing them? You should be able to get all those guidance report and monitor the cost factor. So cost metrics are important. So all these, as I said earlier, depending on what you want to monitor, the metrics will vary. That's about the metrics part. Let's move on to traces. When we talk about traces, the one important thing that we have to keep in mind is what used to be a monolith architecture, the entire application development, where I have all my components of business, the business logics, the user's interface, or the data access layer as one system, is now getting converted to microservice architecture. The industry is moving towards microservice architecture, where each of these components, be it my business logic or the user interface or the data access layer, they can run on its own. It looks very simple. Oh, okay, each of the microservice can be deployed, the build can be deployed, and you can run it on your own. But the complexity lies in monitoring them. You don't know where the problem is, because these instances just spawn on the fly, and they also die on the fly. How do you know what the problem was in that? So monitoring a microservice architecture is very important, and it's very challenging. And tracing is also important here. So tracing across all the tiers, from your client to your database, you must be able to trace and find out the pinpoint, the line of code that is having issue. And when you talk about the distributed architecture or the microservice architecture, distributed tracing, because each of the microservice node can be built in its own programming language. So across all these layers, you must be able to trace and tell where the problem is, and that is a challenge that is solved using tools. Let's move on to logs. Logs, as I said earlier, it is more like consolidating the logs across all the servers in one console. At your comfort, you can look at one UI and see how the logs are and make some meaningful insight out of it. Could be any platform that you want to monitor, any application platform, be it your Nginx servers or your cloud applications, your Java applications, or your Redis and Memcache. The logs can come from anywhere, do some real-time processing, and then they are stored. To put it in one simple term, converting the unstructured data into structured data is what is logs do, and there are tools that do this, and you have to make use of them so that you can find meaningful insight out of it. There are out-of-the-box support for MySQL, Redis. There are 100 different applications for which tools give out-of-the-box log support. Based on what you are using, you can use that tool accordingly. And logs are also important for one more thing, which is auditing. We talk about security. When we talk about security, auditing is very, very important. You must know what has happened in each of these. It could be the audit of the application logs or the OS logs or the access logs. But you have to know what is happening, for which consolidating logs in one place is also important, so that you can be sure who made the change and what change was done, why was it done. Those are needed as evidences, because in cloud people can easily come and say, I did not do this change, how did this change happen? Then you must have data to prove them. The evidence is important for auditing as well. So who has made the change, what change, where was it done, all those are important, all those are logged, and that help in auditing as well. So put it in simple terms, observability in a nutshell is the three pillars. If you can monitor the metrics and trace and logs, you will be able to have the complete view of what is happening in your system. There are many monitoring tools that can help you achieve all these things. Site 24/7 is one such tool. So that's about the monitoring part. Future of observability, what I see as the future for observability based on the various communications, various collaborations that I have with customers and other industry veterans. There are three things that are important. One is AI. AI ops is important, that you have to look in any of the tool that you select. Second is that is picking up is function as a service. The serverless architecture is something that is picking up, that's going to be a future for observability. And the third important thing that you have to look for in any monitoring tool is ICE. I call this as ICE, I-C-E. I'll tell you what those three stands for in a quick 2 minutes time frame. So these three are important for the future of observability. So moving on to the AI part, AI ops can definitely help DevOps in various ways. To quote some few cases where AI can be helpful, or with respect to AI, the one important thing that you have to, or any tool has to take care is train the system with accurate data points. Because the system is not intelligent by itself. It's only as good as or as bad as what is fed into the system. If you're going to feed it with garbage data, you will only get garbage data out. So make sure you are able to train the AI system with accurate data points so that the system can help the DevOps or the IT administrator with quick decision makings. So I'll skip this portion. So I'll go to how AI can help. AI can help with decision making. It can tell you where the problem is, depending on the data that has been collected and depending on the past history that it has. It can correlate and help you with decision making and forecasting. What is my disk usage was 25% in the last 7 days. So based on the previous data that I have, the AI will be able to tell you at what time the disk is going to be full, and it can give you alarms or alert earlier so that you don't get into troubles later. So forecasting is something that AI can help, and it can help with dynamic thresholding. Gone are the days where you ask the end customer to come and give threshold configurations. You know all the data, you know all the past data. Based on that, AI can suggest dynamically and different thresholds for different people. It's not set for all customers the same, because every customer is different. So those smartness can be brought in so that you make the life of end customer easy. And it can also help with corrective actions and conversational chatbots. The AI can be talked at length. So that is something, is a future, which you have to make sure the tool that you're selecting has the AI ops capabilities. And then the ICE that I talked about is nothing but integrability, customizability, and extensibility. When you select a tool, look, the tool is having all these three. So what do we mean by integrability is, you will definitely be having some other tool. So the new tool that is coming in should have the capability to gel well and import and export data and give a unified view. So if there are no options for that without any APIs or without any import export options, it's going to be tough. So look for integrability. Customization. Nobody want to use the product as it is. There could be small changes that they want to do. It could be a color they want to change, the text they want to change, or completely rebrand. So customization option should be there. And then extensibility. We are now living in this era of citizen coders. People want to do some tweak to what is already available. We are hearing about a lot of open source, open tracing, open telemetry. So the system should have API capabilities where they can drag and drop or use the API, build their own UI. Extension should be possible. Don't choose a tool that is very rigid without any having any extension capabilities. So when you're choosing a tool, look for ICE, integrability, customizability, and extensibility. And the final one is about the function as a service. Serverless, we talked about the monolith architecture, microservice architecture. Now the industry is moving towards serverless. That's where industry is moving. And the tools are, again, when we saw microservice itself, tools are important. In serverless, you don't even have a service. It's a server. It's just a function that is coming up and doing the execution and going. So it's very difficult to find any problem in such a case, and tools are important that can help you. So as I said earlier, among the many monitoring tools that are available in the industry, Site 24/7 is one such tool that is there in the industry for the past 14 years now. It's an all-in-one AI-powered monitoring tool that can take care of all your monitoring needs from one single console for all the layers across the 4 layers that we talked about. And there are a lot of analysis and alerting and reporting on top of the monitoring features as well. It is Site 24/7 is a product from Zoho. Zoho has we have our own data centers, and there are 10 different data centers across 5 different regions, a primary and a secondary in each of the locations. So you can choose to have your data in a particular location wherever you want if you feel you don't want your data to go out of the geographical boundary. Being a cloud provider, security, compliance, and certification are given importance, and the process or the product undergoes stringent security audits so that we make sure that we see to that customer data is safe and secure. So the key takeaways from this session is digital experience is important. We saw some references from some books and some quotes. So make sure whatever business you are in, you are able to give that top-notch experience to customers. Observability, it's 3 pillars and how to achieve them. Tools can help you. The future is going to be on the AI ops and the ICE and function as a service. Site 24/7 is one tool that can help DevOps in achieving observability. So before I close, you can take a screenshot of this page. I will also post this in the comment section as a token of giving to the community as part of people who can just try the product or want to use it for to see how it works. If you sign up using this URL, you get a 6 months free subscription of the entire product, and you can see for yourself how it works and then use it so that you can use the tool and take your business to the next level. So before I close, I always, it's my general tendency to close with a quote. This is a famous quote that is my favorite as well. This is called the Red Queen's quote. So if you have read the Alice in Wonderland book, you'll know this, or I did not read it. I just read it for my children. So the quote goes like this: you must be running as fast as you can in order to stay in the same place. And if you want to make any progress, you have to run twice as fast as you can. So I feel this is applicable in general for any person. So, and as a company as well, we do make sure we want to give importance to the latest technologies, keep ourselves updated, use all the technologies, and pass on the benefit to the end users. And as a personal friend also, we should keep ourselves updated, otherwise we will feel outdated. So I just want to close with that note. Thank you for your time. So these are my LinkedIn and Twitter handles. You can reach out to me for any questions that you have.
Thank you, Reggie. Great one. So it should be midnight over there, right? So you're still energetic. You seem like you can do even one more presentation. So okay, I'm just joking. So thank you again for your attendance, and hopefully maybe in the future also it will be an honor to host you again. And we just for the audience, you can also send the link from our Meetup page for the audience to also from the comment. Maybe it will be also an opportunity for whoever interested. So thank you again. Thank you everyone again for your attendance. Next meeting Meetup will be end of the month. It will be done. There will be a meetup about DevOps 101 by JFrog. You can see the details on our Meetup page. So thank you again for everything and for your attendance, and see you next time.